When director Peter Jackson told Christopher Lee to scream after being stabbed in the back, the 79-year-old actor refused. He stopped the production to explain exactly what sound a man makes when a knife pierces his lungs, a horrifying reality he learned during his classified World War II service. It was a chilling collision of fantasy and real-world bloodshed. Witnessing this changed Aragorn forever. Now at 67, Viggo Mortensen finally reveals the truth about Christopher Lee, unmasking the profound unspoken brotherhood they shared and the devastating war memories hidden beneath the wizard's robes. Born Viggo Peter Mortensen Jr. on October 20th, 1958 in New York, his childhood was a nomadic map of shifting international borders. The son of a Danish father and an American mother, he did not grow up walking the manicured lawns of suburban America. Instead, his early years were spent in the sprawling, rugged landscapes of Argentina and Venezuela. He learned to ride horses across the South American pampas, absorbing the quiet brutality and beauty of nature. He learned to speak fluent Spanish, Danish, and English, treating languages as tools of observation rather than mere communication. When his parents divorced and he moved back to the United States as a teenager, Viggo did not seek out the loudest fete crowds. He retreated into the silent, deliberate world of the arts. He wrote poetry painted on large canvases and cultivated an intensely introverted personality. While other future actors were busy networking at flashy Los Angeles parties and begging casting directors for screen time, Viggo was sitting in silence, studying the behavior of the world around him. He was a wanderer who preferred the company of a good book and a quiet horse to the blinding flash of a red carpet. He didn't learn to act. He learned to watch. This unconventional, deeply observant foundation meant that Viggo arrived at the Hollywood doorstep incredibly late by industry standards. He was nearly 27 years old when he landed his first notable on-screen role as a young Amish farmer opposite Harrison Ford in the 1985 thriller Witness. For the next 15 years, he ground his way through the unforgiving Los Angeles ecosystem. Throughout the 1990s, he built a reputation as a reliable, intense supporting actor in independent films, like The Portrait of a Lady and The Passion of Darkly Noon. He worked alongside heavyweights, yet he remained entirely under the global radar. He possessed absolutely no desire to become a franchise poster boy. By the turn of the millennium, he was content living a quiet artistic life in the shadows. Then came the frantic, desperate phone call that would permanently alter cinematic history. It was late 1999. Director Peter Jackson was in a state of absolute crisis in New Zealand. Filming for The Lord of the Rings was just days away, and he had just fired the actor originally cast as Aragorn, realizing he needed an older, more weathered soul to play the exiled king of Gondor. Viggo was thousands of miles away in Spain, entirely unfamiliar with J.R.R. Tolkien's massive literary universe. When offered the role, his immediate instinct was to decline. He refused to leave his young son Henry for a grueling multi-year shoot on the other side of the planet. But Henry, a massive fan of the books, told his father it was the role of a lifetime. Viggo packed a single bag, boarded a flight to New Zealand, and spent the entire transatlantic journey frantically reading the heavy fantasy novels. He stepped off the plane and walked straight into the mud of Middle-earth. And then he didn't chase the crown. The crown demanded him. What followed was an unprecedented 438-day cinematic war. Viggo didn't just play Aragorn. He allowed the character to completely consume his physical reality. He refused to use a rubber prop sword, carrying his heavy steel blade everywhere he went, even into local New Zealand restaurants, drawing highly suspicious looks from the local police. He insisted on performing his own dangerous stunts. The legendary Olympic fencer and swordmaster Bob Anderson explicitly called Viggo the best swordsman he had ever trained. During one intense combat sequence, a stuntman accidentally shattered one of Viggo's front teeth with a real sword. Instead of halting production to visit a hospital, Viggo calmly asked for superglue to stick the tooth back into his gums so he could finish the scene. There is a specific brutal micro detail that captures his absolute dedication better than any award. During a scene in The Two Towers, Aragorn discovers a pile of burning orc bodies and, believing his hobbit friends are dead, kicks a heavy Uruk-hai helmet in despair, letting out a primal scream. That scream was not acting. Viggo had just shattered 2 of his toes on the solid steel prop. Instead of breaking character and asking for medical help, he used the searing physical agony to fuel the emotional devastation of the scene, delivering a take so perfect that Peter Jackson kept it in the final theatrical cut. Pain was just another script direction. The trilogy became an unstoppable cultural juggernaut, grossing a staggering $2.9 billion at the global box office and securing 17 Academy Awards. The Return of the King achieved the impossible, winning all 11 of its Oscar nominations. Overnight, Viggo Mortensen transformed from an obscure indie actor into the most recognizable hero on the planet and a global sex symbol. But the exact moment the trilogy ended, he completely rejected the Hollywood blockbuster formula. He took his massive Lord of the Rings paycheck and immediately founded Percival Press, a small independent publishing house dedicated to printing the works of unknown poets and obscure artists. On screen, he utilized his newfound leverage to fund dark, intense character dramas. He delivered chilling masterclass performances in David Cronenberg's A History of Violence and Eastern Promises, earning an Oscar nomination for his terrifying portrayal of a ruthless Russian mobster. He proved his limitless range by driving a battered school bus in Captain Fantastic and tackling 1960s racial tensions in Green Book. He never signed up for a superhero franchise. He never chased the easy paycheck. He survived the Hollywood machine by simply refusing to belong to it. The personal landscape of Viggo Mortensen's life has always been defined by a fierce, almost monastic devotion to the people he loves rather than the industry he inhabits. In 1987, he married Oksana Khervenka, the lead singer of the legendary punk band X. It was a collision of raw artistic energies, the poet-painter and the punk rock icon. Their marriage lasted 11 years and produced a son, Henry, who would eventually become the single most important compass in Viggo's life. When Viggo and Oksana divorced in 1998, it wasn't a tabloid explosion. It was a quiet, respectful uncoupling. Viggo chose to live a life of intentional solitude, moving to Spain and later New York, rarely seen with a partner and never engaging in the performative dating culture of Los Angeles. He was a man who preferred the company of his horses and his canvases to the manufactured heat of celebrity. This inherent privacy is exactly why his connection to Christopher Lee became the gravitational center of his experience in New Zealand. On the set of The Lord of the Rings, the cast was a chaotic mixture of youthful energy and seasoned professionals. Amidst the hobbits and the rising stars, Viggo, then in his early 40s, found himself magnetically drawn to the oldest man in the room. Christopher Lee was 79 years old when filming began, a towering, ossified legend who had been acting since the 1940s. While others saw a cinematic icon who had played Dracula and Bond villains, Viggo saw a man who carried a weight that had nothing to do with the script. They shared a mutual quiet disdain for the star system, preferring to spend their breaks discussing history, linguistics, and the visceral reality of European heritage. The age gap vanished because they were both operating on the same frequency, a belief that art was a sacred duty, not a commercial transaction. The truth about Christopher Lee that Viggo is finally unmasking goes far beyond the well-known trivia that Lee was the only person on set to have actually met J.R.R. Tolkien. To Viggo, the real revelation was the terrifying, unvarnished history hidden beneath Saruman's white robes. During the filming of The Return of the King, the production faced a moment that has since become a chilling piece of cinematic folklore. Peter Jackson was attempting to direct Lee in a scene where Saruman is stabbed in the back by Wormtongue. Jackson told Lee to let out a loud, dramatic scream of agony. Lee stopped the director cold. He didn't raise his voice. He simply leaned in and whispered, with a chilling clinical precision, "Have you any idea what kind of noise happens when somebody is stabbed in the back? Because I do." He explained that when a knife pierces the lungs, the air is sucked out, and the person can only manage a short, breathless gasp. The silence on set was absolute. Viggo, standing just feet away, realized in that moment that he wasn't looking at a classically trained actor. He was looking at a man who had participated in the darkest chapters of the 20th century. Christopher Lee had been a member of the British Special Forces and the Long-Range Desert Group during World War II, a real-life secret agent who had hunted Nazis and witnessed the liberation of concentration camps. He wasn't acting the sound of death. He was recalling it. Witnessing this collision of fiction and trauma fundamentally altered Viggo's approach to his own craft. He realized that Christopher Lee had spent 50 years playing monsters, Dracula, the mummy Count Dooku, as a way to safely channel the horrors he had seen during this war. Lee wasn't interested in the glory of the wizard. He was interested in the psychological accuracy of the broken. Viggo reveals that Lee would often break down in private, his eyes filling with tears as he spoke about the friends he lost in the 1940s, men whose names the world would never know. The shattering for Viggo was the realization that his legendary co-star used the fantasy of Middle-earth to hide the scars of a real-world soldier. Lee taught him that an actor's primary responsibility is to be a witness for those who can no longer speak. He showed Viggo that the hero and the villain are both forged in the same fire of human suffering. This is why Viggo's Aragorn feels so weary, so reluctant, and so deeply haunted. He was channeling the real-life gravity of the man playing his enemy. The truth that stayed with Viggo for 20 years is that Christopher Lee was the most vulnerable person on that set, a man who survived the greatest war in history only to find himself dressed in a wizard's robe and still trying to make sense of the carnage. As Viggo navigates his he admits that the most important thing he learned in New Zealand wasn't how to swing a sword or lead an army. It was how to carry the truth of a human life with dignity. He defended Lee's legacy when critics called him difficult, knowing that what they called difficult was actually the uncompromising standard of a man who had seen what happens when people stop telling the truth. Christopher Lee died in 2015 at the age of 93, but for Viggo Mortensen, he has never truly left the room. The truth is that the King of Gondor didn't learn how to rule from a script. He learned how to live from a soldier who had forgotten how to scream. You can build a world of CGI and magic, but you can never fake the sound of a man who knows exactly what it means to die. One man played a wizard, but the other man found a father in the uniform of a ghost. At 67, Viggo is finally ready to let the world hear the gasp. The immediate aftermath of Christopher Lee's death in 2015 wasn't a headline for Viggo Mortensen. It was the closing of a door to a specific kind of artistic integrity. While the world mourned a cinematic giant, Viggo privately mourned the only man who truly understood the weight of the crown. In the decades since Lee passed at the age of 93, Viggo has remained fiercely loyal to the lessons learned in the trenches of Middle-earth. He continued to reject the assembly line logic of Hollywood, choosing roles in Captain Fantastic and Green Book that demanded the same raw, unvarnished honesty he saw in Lee. Viggo is no longer the reluctant king. He is the guardian of a vanishing standard. He realized that Christopher Lee's difficulty was actually a refusal to be shallow. One man played a wizard, but the other man found a father in the uniform of a ghost. The long-term consequence of this brotherhood is a profound transformation in how Viggo inhabits his own life. He lives between the rugged landscapes of Idaho and the quiet streets of Madrid, still riding horses, still painting, and still refusing to belong to the celebrity machine. He has found a reconciliation not with the industry, but with the darkness Lee shared with him. He understands now that the most important thing an artist can do is carry the truth of the dead into the light of the living. Viggo Mortensen is finally at peace with the fact that his definitive one in the industry wasn't a romantic lead, but a 79-year-old veteran who taught him that the only thing more powerful than a sword is the truth. This revelation serves as a breathtaking mirror for all of us. It asks us to look at the monsters in our own lives, the difficult mentors, the stoic grandparents, the people whose high standards felt like a burden. We all have a Christopher Lee, someone whose quiet, haunted wisdom is the only thing standing between us and a hollow life. We spend our youth resisting their weight only to spend our ACHU, realizing they were the only ones holding us up. The crown is heavy because it is full of ghosts. Who is the person in your life who forced you to be honest when it would have been easier to lie? Is there a mentor whose difficult standards shaped the person you are today? Drop into the comments below and share your story. If you believe that the most legendary bonds are the ones forged in the shadows of the real world, hit the like button and subscribe. Because as Viggo Mortensen finally admitted, the most enduring stories of The Lord of the Rings were never the ones on the screen. They were the ones told in the silence between takes by a king and a wizard who had both seen too much of the real world to ever pretend. He didn't just play a king. He learned to be one. We will see you in the next one.